All right, we are lights, camera, action on this end.
Very good. Do you want me to wait till the end of the hour and start right then, or do you want? It's up to you.
If you're ready to go, we're ready to go.
Okay, well, very good. Good morning, everyone. I'm Anthony Luscre, Kilo 8 Zulu Tango, and today's presentation is how to make that QSO. Get in the rhythm, know the rhyme, and dance the dance. Get the mouse working there. This is my contact information, K8ZT at AWRL.net will get emailed to me, and my website is at K8ZT.com. This is me in my trainman's uniform. I volunteer at a scenic railroad in our area. Today's presentation has a number of links in it, and you can get to this presentation slideshow by going to tiny.cc/r-d. So tiny.cc rhythm rhyme dance. Anytime you see this font or one of these little link symbols, that means there's a link you can click on for more information. I'll demonstrate that as we go through. So what is the rhythm, the rhyme, and the dance? Well, they refer to different aspects of making contacts. The rhythm is really the timing and frequency choice. The rhyme is the contest exchange, the signal report exchange, the actual contact itself. Dance the dance is listening to, then mimicking successful stations in the way that they make their contacts. So let's jump into the rhythm first. One of the biggest things about the rhythm, especially for new people starting out, is when you're tuning a station in, especially on single sideband, but on CW also, it's being able to spot your radio on the other station. We're going to assume in most cases the station wants you to be on the exact same frequency as they are, what we refer to as zero beating. But we'll find out that sometimes they don't exactly zero beat, and other times they specifically don't want you transmitting on their frequency. And they'll say that they're working split, either up or down, and they'll give a range of frequencies. This is quite often the case with DX stations, but you might run into it with other stations also. But even when you're working a station on their own frequency, some may tend to listen a little higher or a little low in frequency. Some may only be listening dead on. It also depends quite a bit on whether they have very narrow filters or very wide filters. On both phone and CW, to be successful at making contact, it's usually helpful to match their speed. Going at about the same speed as the station is transmitting usually gets you the best response. Now, of course, if it's on CW and you're not capable of receiving at a very high rate, send at a slower rate. You should only send at approximately the same rate at which you can receive CW. You also need to realize which stations is the CQing station answering. Are they answering stations above them, below them? Are they answering stations that are tail ending them? And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Are they answering stations that give their call sign twice, etc., etc.? If you're operating CW, a smooth sending rhythm, no matter what your speed, can be very helpful to attract contacts. If you're sending sloppy CW, when you're responding to a station and they have their choice of multiple stations to answer, you may go down on the list. Consistency is necessary in sending. Speed, spacing, and weighting are all important. Whether you're making a CW or single sideband contact, it's a lot like merging onto a busy freeway. There may be a lot of competition, so you need to have your timing just right. Going too fast, too slow, or not going at the right time can mean failure, whereas picking the right time can mean success. Let's talk about the rhyme a little bit. Knowing the rhyme. Know your exchange. If you're going to be operating in a contest or even just making a casual QSO, knowing what you're going to give as your exchange back to the other station is very helpful. You don't want to have to sit there and wait or try and figure out what it is. The general rule on contesting is if you're eligible for the station to work you, they'd be happy to work you as long as you can provide them with the exchange that they need. So for example, let's say you're not interested in competing, you're simply interested in making a contact with the DX station next week during the ARRL DX contest will know your exchange, so you can simply give them the exchange. In that contest, it's rather easy. It's your state, so I'm sure you would guess that pretty quickly, but sometimes it involves a serial number or other types of things. If it's multiple pieces to the exchange, know the order and format stations are expecting you to send the exchange in, and I'll talk a little bit more about this on a later slide. If it's a phone contest, using standard phonetics or the best effective phonetic can be your best route to getting a contact. I want to give you a little experience I had about 3 weeks ago. I was listening to a station. It was a W6. I'm sure he was running at least 100 watts. He was extremely loud. He was trying to work an FY station down in French Guiana, and he was giving non-standard phonetics. The simple exchange of signal reports and call signs took almost 2 minutes. When he was done, I called with my 5 watts, and on the first try, I got the station and finished the contact. The difference was the other station was using non-standard phonetics. The person in French Guiana was not an English speaker, and he was having difficulty getting the other station's call sign. So don't make it harder on yourself by using cute or non-standard phonetics. In voice contacts, say the word 0, don't use O or ah. Some other things that can be very helpful are knowing keywords. I have a link here to Q codes, and again, as I said, when you see that little symbol there, that font, that means there's a link there. And here's some of the most common abbreviations and Q signs available here, and you can click on these links on the side here to see each of these. And this is a very good site, K8ZT. By the way, there are probably 10 times as many Q signs as are shown here. Amateurs don't use all of them. When you look at it, really, we use about a dozen to maybe 20 of the Q signs regularly. Some of them are very odd. I'm sure maybe most of you don't know what QSZ means. It means, shall I send each word twice? So it's a rather obscure one. But having a chart handy is a good way to find these. Again, I have 2 links here for abbreviations in addition to the ones that are on the first link, because there are a number of abbreviations out there that you might find useful or need to use. And this one's talking about a variety of abbreviations. And the interesting thing is our abbreviations are much more standardized for Morse code than they are for texting. So it's very similar in that respect, but we've been doing it longer, so we're much more standardized. Also, knowing a few key phrases in foreign languages can be very helpful. I have a little chart here that has the number 8 in 14 languages. Why would you want that? Well, Douglas can use it because he's an 8 like I am. But I also have another link here with numbers in 13 different languages, including all of the numbers, both the cardinal and ordinal numbers in a variety of languages. Now, you're saying, why do you have the numbers and not the letters? Because I'm expecting to use the standard phonetics for the letters, but being able to know the number in another language can sometimes be helpful. Also, there's a radio amateur conversation guide that was put out by 2 Finnish hams back in the 80s, I think it was, and it's out of print, but they have given me permission to post the PDF of it so you can get the whole document, and it has the key here to what the languages are, and then they have the numbers, and they have phonetics and other things, and then they also have little phrases, like starting a QSO in different languages. Now you might say, well, I don't need to know that. Well, sometimes it can make the difference. And for example, what language might you use to make a contact in Africa? Well, there's a lot of countries that have French as one of the common languages in Africa, so knowing French can be helpful in that case. Another thing about knowing the rhyme is avoiding filler words. This is something you hear a lot during field day when you have people that don't operate in contest situations very often. They'll preface their exchange with, please copy, my call sign is, your report is. And these can be helpful sometimes when you're just trying to catch your breath or get things going, but they're not necessary to do all the time. They just take more time. Also, with DX stations especially, avoid slang, idioms, and other items that may cause confusion. For making the exchange, it's important that you know what the exchange is for each contest, and a great way to find that is Bruce Horn's remarkable site called the WA7BNN Contest Calendar. And when you click on that link, it'll take you out to the contest. You can either look at the 8-day view, which we're doing right now, the 12-month view, etc., etc. Pick any contest you want. Let's take a look at the South Carolina QSO party, and you'll see that the exchange for this particular party is an RST plus the county if you're in state. If you're out of state, RST plus the state, province, or DX. The North American QSO party, the exchange is your name plus your state. Now, by the way, any contest that requires you to use your name, it doesn't have to be your given or full name. For example, Anthony doesn't work. It's too long. I don't like Tony. So my name in all contests is AL. It's actually, people think it's Al, but it's actually my initials. But I use Al as my name in contests because it's nice and easy to send, short, and I don't have to spell it for people. But you can know the contest exchange. Also, if the contest involves grid squares or other geographic features, I have a whole document put together here, and it's actually on how to find hams in your area and also how to find your grid square. It talks about how the grid squares are made up. For amateur radio purposes, we really only need the first 6 characters at the most, and most exchanges only use the first 4. So I'm in Echo November 91 HE, but most of the time I will simply be sending a report of Echo November 91. And you can use these little tools to find what your grid square is down to the 6-digit characters. Sometimes we're using zones or such as CQ zones, ITU zones, AWRL sections, etc. I have an extensive document here called Maps and Charts. It has band map plans, but it also has things like grid square maps, CQ zone maps, ITU zone maps, prefix maps, and then I also have lists here of things like the AWRL sections. By the way, if you don't realize, if you haven't heard it yet, they're going to be changing a couple of sections for Canada. So when you work field day this year or other contests, they're not going to be using the same exact things. The GTA, the Greater Toronto Area, is now going to be changed, and I have the new one. I'll put the new ones up here. This is still the old chart that I'm showing right here. Canadian maps with prefixes. I couldn't find one of these, so I actually created one myself. So you can take a look at this. VE0, by the way, you know where that's at? That is a Canadian maritime mobile station, is a VE0. But here's the different provinces. The new the GTA is now going to be called the Golden Horseshoe. But know your own information. And if you're a POTA operator or a SOTA operator and you go out in the field, make sure in addition to the park that you're at, you know the code number for that, but also know the county and the grid square you're in. So if other people ask you for that information, you'll be able to give it out. Now, knowing the exchange is not good enough, especially when it revolves multiple elements. In addition to knowing the exchange, you need to know the order in which the exchange should be given. This is very important for some contests like the AWRL sweepstakes where you're doing multiple items in the exchange. So your best bet is to listen to see other people doing it and then copy that style. So here on the right here is an example of what I mean. This is the AWRL sweepstakes. We give the serial number, the station power designator, the call sign. You got to give your call sign again, the check number, which is the year you were first licensed, and your section, AWRL section. So he's in Western Pennsylvania. The station quickly acknowledges with a Roger, Roger, thank you, and everything is great. Notice here, our young gentleman sends the same exact information, but he sends it in a different order. This order is not expected by the person, and of course, they're not listening for it in that order, and they miss the exchange. So using the correct exchange, the correct abbreviations, it's very important to use the right order also. How do you know if the station has successfully received your exchange? They might send one of the following: TU on CW, or thank you on phone, Roger or Roger, Roger on CW, or Roger on phone, QSL 73, okay, yes, or other affirmatives. Or if it was going really smoothly and they finish up with it and they just start calling CQ or QRZ, that means they got you. I don't understand why stations do that, because it's so easy just to drop in a quick TU, but some stations do that. If the station has not successfully received your exchange, what would they send back to you? Well, they might send you a question mark on CW or 2 question marks. They might send you call with a question mark, or they might say your call, please. That means they don't have your call sign. Again, or repeat means they want you to give the whole exchange again. NR with a question mark or number means that they're usually missing the serial number or the zone number. But they might send anything like the full exchange, the section, the county, the state, the CQ zone. If they only ask for part of your exchange, give that part so they can concentrate on that and don't give the whole exchange over and over again. If they send B4 or dupe, they think you previously worked them. Make sure you have. If you haven't, let them know that they haven't worked you and worked the station. It doesn't hurt to logs dupes. They'll be eliminated from the log afterward. So here's a quick little chart on did they copy me. Again, if it's no, they'll do one of these things, as I talked about earlier. And if it's yes, they will do one of these things. The two I haven't talked about so far are nil and later. Nil means that you're not in the log. That means don't log this. They didn't get all the information. Also, later or sorry means they can't contact you now. Don't keep trying. Try back later. And that's what they mean. If the station has not successfully received you, consider repeating it twice, but don't get carried away with endless repeating. Consider alternative phonetics. Quite often, if I am answering a station calling CQ and they come back and say, the Kilo Zero station, please, the Kilo Zero station, and no one answers, I'm going to assume that they busted my call and they want Kilo 8 Zulu Tango. They confuse the zero for Zulu, so I might come back and go, this is Kilo 8 Zanzibar Tangos, to make sure they're not confusing the Zulu with zero. So have a good set of alternative phonetics for missed letters. Don't just keep saying the same thing over and over again. But don't get carried away with excessive use of double calls, exchanges. In good conditions, they can frustrate other stations and slow things down. There's no reason to send your exchange twice if everyone's getting on the first try. On phone, you can use the advantage of pitch in your voice and cadence to help get the information across. So by varying the pitch or cadence, you can emphasize certain characters, words, letters, etc. If the station repeats back to you your exchange with a question mark on CW or ask you if you're correct, confirm it. Give them a quick R or Roger or QSL to let them know that it's correct. If it's wrong, send a no, negative, or say negative, and then repeat the correct exchange until they get it right. It's very important. I've heard people quickly move away from a CW contact and then the station sends back their call with a question mark because they didn't get the call sign right. So make sure that you're listening to see that you've completed the contact. I mentioned Neil and later. Again, if they're saying later or sorry, come back later and try again later. Don't try right now. Occasionally, the station may respond with something completely differently. As I mentioned earlier, before or dupe means they possibly worked you. But they might say QSY2 and say a band. This is very common on VHF, UHF contests. A station may complete a contact and say, what other bands do you have? Or can you QSY to 2 meters or 440, etc. You can also get this in an HF contest when you're a rare multiplier that the station needs. They might say, can you QSY to 21.350? We need you on that band also. Whether you choose to do it or not is up to you. It means another contact usually, so I tend to always do it. What happens if someone compliments you on your signal, wants to say hello, wants to chat for a while? Well, acknowledge it. Give them a quick response. A simple thank you or 73 is often a good response. Don't tie them up too long. I had a station stop a couple years ago on a contest. In the middle of a big run, they stopped to thank me for a contact that I had given them in a previous contact. And I definitely wanted to acknowledge that and tell them I appreciated it very much, but I didn't want to hold them up too long. So a quick response is a great way to do it. Dance the dance. The dance involves us listening to the caller's instructions, following those instructions, listening to successful stations, and mimicking their operation. The first thing is, when you hear a station calling CQ, who are they calling for? Only answer if you meet the criteria. If they're calling for an area of the world, if they're saying CQ Vermont, and you're not in Vermont, don't answer. If they're calling for North America and you're not in North America, don't answer. If they're calling for Europe and you're in the United States, don't answer. If they're calling for a specific call sign area, only answer if you're in that call sign area. If they're asking for a specific type of station, mobile, QRP, YL, etc., answer only if you meet the criteria. If they say CQ and they're saying ATNO or all-time U, and that means they're a rare DX station, they only want you to call if you've never worked that country before on any band or mode. So when they say ATNO, that doesn't mean that you want to get the 6th band with them. So you want to quickly answer. They want to get stations who've never worked that country or that entity. If it's a contest and they're calling for CQ, they're calling CQ contest, only answer if you can participate in the contest. So, for example, let's say it's the Worked All Europe contest, and you're not and you're here a U.S. station calling for Worked All Europe. Well, you're not in Europe, so you're not eligible for them to make a contact, so don't answer. If it's a state QSO party and they're calling for stations in South Carolina only, don't answer unless you're in South Carolina. But otherwise, you're welcome to answer. In all the state QSO parties, if the station is in state, for example, it's a station in South Carolina calling CQ this weekend, you're eligible to answer from anywhere else in the world because they're the state in the QSO party and they're looking for anyone anywhere. Just all you need to know is make sure you know the exchange that they're going to expect. Next thing to do is listen and find out where the other station is listening. If they say split, they typically say up. Occasionally they'll say down, but they'll also give you either a number or a range. Quite often on CW, if they simply say up and they don't give you a range, assume they're starting 1 kilohertz up. If they do give you a range like 5 up, then start at 5 up, and sometimes they'll say 5 to 10. But if they say 5 up, that means they may be working above 5. They want people to spread out. If they're working simplex, call them on their frequency. 0 beat them. But if you hear other stations are slightly above or below, you want to 0 beat the station that they replied to so that you're calling on the same frequency that they were listening to. Occasionally you'll have crossband contacts. The most common thing for crossband contacts is the U.S. military to ham operations in May, where the military calls on their frequencies. We're not allowed to call there, so we reply on a ham frequency that they will specify. Know your radio, know how to 0 beat another station, know how to work split, and how to quickly listen to the frequencies that the other stations are calling back on. Know how to use the reverse button or use the A-B switch on your VFO. Know how to use the RIT and X-RIT to move your signal, either to move your receive only signal and stay on the same transmitting frequency, or to move your transmitting frequency and stay on the same receiving frequency. Now, Yaesu on some of their radios labels the RIT as a clarifier. Know how to use memories. I can quickly go to a band and go to the CW portion of that band by pushing 2 buttons. It makes it a lot easier than having to tune all the way up from one portion of the band to the other by having memory set up for these particular places. It's not quite the same as the memories you use on your VHF, UHF radio. I have my memory set at the top and the bottom of each segment of the band so I can easily quickly move to that. If they're not working split, but they're not exactly answering on their frequency, as I said earlier, try 0 beating first. If not, try shifting slightly off frequency. Sometimes it's best to transmit the same speed and pace as the CW station it's calling, but sometimes it helps to vary your speed or frequency slightly so that you stand out from the rest of the crowd. You want to be the station they're hearing. Now, don't go to extremes, but just moving your signal slightly higher or lower so you change the tone, or changing your speed slightly can make a big difference. Try pausing sometimes before responding. He might be answering late callers, especially if the frequency is very busy. You might want to try a double reply, giving your call twice. Sometimes that will not be successful at all. Other times it will be. So you want to stand out in the crowd. You want to make sure they can hear you. And again, you want to make sure that you have the clear, easy to copy signal. Now, something I refer to as the secret language of the exchange. You've read all the rules, understand what the exchange should be, but when you start listening, you hear something completely different and you go, what is going on here? I thought the exchange for this contest was X, Y, and Z, but I'm hearing something completely different. And this is what I call the secret language of the exchange. There's three things that occur that cause the secret language of the exchange. The first one we already talked about is the accepted order of the elements. In other words, not only do you want to give the exchange right, but you want to make sure you're giving in the right order. The second thing has to do with CW only, and it's called cut numbers. This is when we use letters to abbreviate specific numbers. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then the third type is what is called unintentional call numbers. In other words, sloppy CW, where they're trying to send a specific number, but that's not what they're really sending. And then the other thing is a confirmation or repeats. Did they copy it at all? So let's talk about cut numbers first. Over the years, even before there were radios and they were just using wire telegraphy, it was very common to want to be able to send the least number of elements possible. And with numbers, hams have taken certain numbers and abbreviated them with letters. So the 599 typical contest exchange is almost never sent that way in a CW contest. They will send 5NN, where the N represents a 9. Another thing that's started occurring just in the last 3 years is people have stopped sending the 5. They're now sending ENN. So you might hear some ENNs, but most people still send 5NN. So they're replacing a 5-element character, the 9, with a 1 or 2 element letter number, such as the N in this case. The other there are cut numbers for almost all the digits, but there's really only 3 of them that are used really commonly, and that is the N for the 9, and the T for the 0, and the A for the 1. Those are the 3 most common cut numbers. And if you start getting into the other ones, it gets very confusing. I can probably add the fact that a lot of people are sending the E in place of the 5, but that's just starting to happen. The other letter you will hear is the abbreviation of K for 1,000. So if you were operating in the CW, ARRL, DX contest a week ago, the people that had 1,000 watts were sending either K or KW. People with 100 watts are sending ATT. Now the problem is, I kept hearing stations that were dropping the last T, so I thought maybe they were sending 10. Now the T is very easy to drop because it's one character. If their amplifier switchover is quick and it doesn't get that last character in, whereas with 100, they would be sending 5 DAWs, so I would hear it and know that they were probably sending that last one. So be very careful. You can actually cause problems by using cut numbers excessively. Now, unintentional cut numbers are when people send numbers sloppily and they shorten them. So, for example, you'll quite often hear 5 dits shortened down to 4 dits. When this happens, we have to guess at what the number was. Were they sending a 5? Was the missing character a DAW? Was the missing character a DAW at the beginning of it? So in this case, it could have been a 4, a 5, or a 6. But what I did copy was an H. So you want to be careful with these. Quite often you'll hear 5s chopped off and there'll be H's. Quite often you'll also hear 2s sent very sloppily, and you will hear a J. So if you're hearing a bunch of people sending J in a number, it's probably a 2, but it's hard to confirm that. So far, we've been focused on you answering the other station CQs, which is also called search and pouncing. Let's talk a little bit about now when you want to make a QSO and you want to call CQ. Calling CQ in a contest is called running. Most hams new to contesting, or especially CW, tend to do search and pounce because it's often difficult to handle multiple simultaneous repliers when you call CQ if you're not experienced, especially if your CW copying skills aren't that great. But you can spend plenty of time listening for a station when you're hunting and pouncing and not have to have that pressure on you that you do when you're calling CQ. I would suggest you try out calling CQ in non-contesting situations for a lot less stressful process, and that'll help you learn how to call CQ and deal with the power-up that results. If you're calling CQ, use a sending speed that you will also feel comfortable copying, both in phone and CW. If you talk too fast, Expect people to talk fast back to you. If you send CW fast, expect people to respond to you fast. If the station comes back a little too fast for your copying ability, feel free to send a QRS, which means please slow down your speed of sending. Most people will gladly acknowledge you because they want to make the contact. Also, make sure you know common Q codes that someone might send to you or that you might send to someone. A list of common pro signs and CW abbreviations again. And I would suggest a script for what you want to send, printed out and sitting right in front of you so that you don't get nervous during the process. This way you don't need to worry about what you're going to say. Before calling CQ, listen to make sure that no one else is using the frequency. Send a quick QRL or on phone ask, is this frequency in use? Also, remember to also include your call sign in both cases because you're transmitting. Listen again. If clear, begin sending your CQ. I suggest the format of CQ, CQ, DE, K8ZT. But in contesting, you'll never hear the DE or almost never hear the DE. It's superfluous. Most contesters are worried about speed. They will simply do a quick CQ, their call sign, maybe a QRZ in their call sign, but they won't bother to send the DE. If you're looking for a specific contact, you might want to add something else like CQDX, CQ Contest, CQ Fill Day, CQ Vermont, etc., etc. When answering a CQ, don't answer if they're calling for a specific zone you're not in. If they are replying to the ZT station, your call has no ZT in it, don't answer. They're calling me. If a station sends a call that is extremely close to yours and you hear no one else answering, definitely send your call. Give your full call sign unless they are only requesting the last two characters. This is pretty much used exclusively in net operation. Don't do it in a general follow-up. All you do is cause the station to have to ask you to repeat the rest of your call, and it slows things down. Most QSOs fall into one of these following categories: a quick 599 exchange with a DX station or a rare station, a contest exchange, POTA, SOTA, etc., a net check-in, a short chat, a long QSO, a full rag chew. These are the type of contacts you'll probably make, and having a script for these different contacts can make it much easier if you're just starting out. The Long Island CW group has a list of protocols, and you can click on this link and this gets you access to all four of these different written documents that have short scripts for making contacts. You can also create your own scripts with your information, and I suggest that you also in your station have a operator and station information sheet. So when someone tells you what their age is, you can look at your sheet and know your age without having to count and figure out what it is. Also remember your county, your CQ zone. Your ITU zone is not as commonly used, but so you need to know it. Know your grid score out the 6 characters. You might want your longitude and latitude. You might want your little conversion chart for Fahrenheit to centigrade for Celsius for temperatures, what your antenna and other equipment is. Make a copy and have this at your station. I've actually created a template here. You just click on this, you click on the make a copy, and it'll let you fill out all the information with your own information and have this sheet in your shack. You can come in here and change this information to your own. I recently took part in a 3-week presentation called Beginner's Guide to HF Operation. In this, Dennis Kidder, W6DQ, and I talk about the HF bands, operating and making contacts, equipment and antennas, and putting it all together. You can watch videos of all 3 weeks. They're about an hour long, about an hour and 15 minutes each one of them. And there's also a slideshow for the whole presentation. I also just recently created a new presentation. I'll be giving this live at the QSO Today Expo in a couple of weeks. It's the 10-meter band, fun for all. You can go to the slideshow right here. There's no recording of it right now. I also have a presentation called Successful Operating. This helps you assess if you're calling CQ and no one's answering you, or you're answering other CQs and they're not responding to you. It might be one of a couple things. Either one, you have no friends and no one wants to talk to you because you're boring, or B, you're having problems with your equipment. So these are great ways to check out everything to make sure you know why they're not answering you. Also have information here on getting your first worked all states and DXCC top secret tips for doing that. That completes my formal presentation. I'll take questions and answers in a few minutes. But again, to get to today's presentation, tiny.cc/r-r-d. Also, my contact information again. And then I also have another list of all the presentations I've been doing. I've done over 300 presentations since the beginning of COVID, and I have a list of wide variety of beginners topics, buying and selling amateur radio equipment, call signs, contesting, Morse code, DXing, field day, food, FT8, FT4, general information, history of broadcast, interviews I've done, logging software, operating, QRP, QSLing, portable operations, Rat Pack, which I'll talk about in a second here, State QSO Party Challenge, station setup, tech licensees, etc., and youth. So these are all available. And if you would like a presentation for your club, take a look at the list, email me at the bottom of the list here, and I'd be happy to do a Zoom presentation for your local amateur radio club. I mentioned the Rat Pack group. When you click on this link, it'll take you out to the Rat Pack site, and the Rat Pack site has a listing of all the programs every Wednesday and Thursday night for the last 3 years. They've been doing a program almost every week, and you can see upcoming programs. You can also watch videos of previous ones. So if you missed the one on Wednesday night called FC Band Products, Announcements, Rumors of Amateur Radio Impact by Michelle and Dennis, you can click on YouTube and view this, or you can join us live via Zoom on Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, 02 UTC, to join us live for those Zoom sessions. Please feel free to use any of the sessions for your local club programs if you'd like to show one of those. So what I'll do now is I'll go ahead and take any questions you might have. Again, access to this slideshow is available at tiny.cc/r/r/d. Oh, let me, just before I ask questions, I put out a document on Facebook and on some mailing list and on Twitter last week, or this week, called Get a Local Ham on 10 Meters. And you can get to this at tiny.cc/glhotm. And basically what I'm suggesting is you invite a ham to your shack who's never been on HF and give them a chance to operate this coming weekend during the ARRL phone contest. There'll be a lot of stations on during that contest, and it's a great opportunity. Also today there is a special event station operating at the HamCon. So when we're done today, please feel free to visit them, or also listen for them on the air if you're connecting remotely. So I'll go ahead now and take questions. And also go ahead and stop.
So unfortunately, the room cleared out on me.
I saw they all ran away. There was people in there. I saw there's someone that wandered back in because he has a question for me, a comment or a suggestion.
Bob's our photographer.
Hi, Bob. And I noticed my light dropped down here in my room. My wife opened a blind before she left. She has obsession with blinds, and before she walked out of the room, she opened a blind to change the lighting in my room. Okay, so I'll adjust my background lights there. So any of the people that are remote, if you have any questions, comments, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Tony, there is a question in the chat. It says my call sign is 0, but I'm in New York, District 2. If someone asks for District 0, can I answer, or should I keep silent since I'm physically in District 2? That's from KC0MMY.
It depends how they ask the question. In most cases, I would say that they're not going to pay attention to where you're actually at. They're going to go by the number in your call sign. So I would answer as 0, because if they ask for 2s and your answer is a 0, they're probably going to ignore you. So you're going to have to take your chances and do it as a 0. Now, if they specifically ask for people in the second call district, you might want to do it. But most of the time, they're just going to say 2s or 0s. They're not going to say stations in the call district. So answer with the 0s would be my suggestion. Either that or get a new call sign with a 2 in it, but that's totally up to you. Other questions, comments?
Well, I know that I loaded up a couple of links that you put up there that I'm going to check out in depth later. So those are great. That's a great tool, and I appreciate you sharing those with us.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I think please feel free to use any of the documents like the charts and maps, run a copy in your local newsletter. I know that newsletters are always looking for articles, and I'm more than happy for you to use either that article, that, or any of my other written materials. Just make sure you put my name with it, and I'd be happy for you to use it.
Well, thank you, Tony. I appreciate that.
Anyone else out there? I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'm not really as scary as I look in person.
Anybody in Zoom land have any questions? You can put it in chat, or if you have video going, you can make monkey motions and I can unmute you.
Or you can just unmute them all and they can have a free-for-all. We can pretend it's a pow-up.
That sounds great. I'm going to do that.
Okay, now you know, now no one has any reason not to ask any questions. Are we being recorded today?
Yes, we are.
If you're not going to ask questions, I'm going to start asking you all questions. So I would suggest asking questions, or I will start.
I think that's fair.
Yes, go ahead, out there in the audience.
Bob was just wondering what the meaning of life was.
There's
42.
one peacemaker that I want, but I'm never gonna find it. But it's on Amazon. But it's a stamped eyeliner, so it's stamped. So they're perfectly.
I'm hearing Bruce's audio, but I'm not sure if that's Bruce himself. It's on.
Yes, it was me because you told me that you wanted me to unmute.
Yes, go right ahead. What question do you have for us, Bruce?
Oh, I didn't have a question.
What question
I'm
does
sorry.
does the other person in the room have for us?
He left out of me. He's my computer. He's my computer guru.
That's always good to have one of those. I actually function in that format for a number of my club members. And I actually, during the pandemic, I actually set up a number of stations using remote control to help people set up for FT8 or logging software by doing that. Where are you located, Bruce?
I was with Mitch Stern. I'm in Essex.
Okay, very good.
I'm part of Ranby.
Ah, good.
But I'm 80 and I don't travel a lot, and so I take advantage of Zoom when I can for the meeting. So I certainly appreciate the effort you put forward with all your presentations. I can tell you that. So, and of course, I just sat in on that one, but you compete against the world. I was not aware of that. That was a brand new subject, and with the gentleman out in Montana that
Pat. That was Pat.
has this magnificent station, evidently.
Yes, and I work Pat all the time, and you want to remember that call sign because he's your Montana multiplier before people catch on that he's a 9. I was doing a presentation for a group, and I mentioned Pat's call sign. I mentioned N2IC, who's Steve out in New Mexico, another quick multiplier with a different. And it was so funny because I got an email from Steve that day about something else. I said, "You must have heard me talking about you, Steve, because you sent me an email right after I talked about you in the presentation."
Well, I was disappointed that nobody asked him any questions because it was a brand new knowledge. I had no idea that there was this world trying to equate, operators to look at the bill. That must be a tremendous amount of fun for contesters too.
It is, and you can actually see if you participate in contests, you can actually see what your rating is. He talked about the different ratings. If you go out to the WRTC site, you can look at the qualification, and actually, even if you're not a big time contester, but you do a few contests, you'll show up in the list. So I can show that real quick. Let me go ahead and bring my share back up here again. Sort of fun to look at if you've never.
So is Mitch on the list, for example?
Yes, we'll see. We'll see where Mitch is at here. We'll take a look. If you go out to the qualification site,
I've never heard Mitch talk about doing that, but I sort of feel
let's see.
he's one of our.
Let's see if he's there. Let's look up. He's W1SJ, correct?
Correct. Yes.
No, it's not showing up there. Let me put myself in there to make sure this is working. Here we go. So I operate all 5 watts here, so I'm a QRP operator. I'm 88th in my area, so I'm not going by any stretch of the imagination. But it's interesting to see because you get different amounts of points for how high you score in the contest, not your total score. So you'll see I got 157 points in this particular contest. This one I didn't take part in. Now coming up, I should have. Well, let's keep my fingers crossed. I have the highest raw score for the CQ Worldwide phone contest in QRP category, so we'll see if I win that. If that's the case, I should get a big boost in this with a number of points. But yeah, you can look in here to see whether you're ranked, or you can look at who's in your area. So let's look at Pat.
What do you want for QRP gear?
Elecraft K3S 10 watt version. So here's Pat's score. You can see that Pat has 800 points. So he scored very high in that contest. 1,000 points. He won that contest for his area. 1,000 points. He won that contest for his area. So Pat is no slouch. He does a wonderful job. And you notice his rank is 3rd in this area. And the only people that are above him are K7RL, who's a big time contester, and KU1CW. These are all of these people in the top 10 here, people I work very regularly in contests.
They must be able to copy CW in their sleep, huh?
I think they can. I can't do that. Now, another fun thing, if you're interested, there's an activity every year called the CQ DX Marathon, and it's a different kind of contest because it's a year-long contest. It takes place all year, and if you go to my presentations, you'll see information on that. It's called the CQ DX Marathon, and the way this works is each January 1st you start anew, and you get 1 point for every CQ country that you work. It's just very similar to the DXCC list, but there's a few extras. There's a few extras in there, like you get credit for the Italian islands, you get credit for Sicily, etc. So there's a few extras. There's like 5 extras. In the 40 CQ zones, it doesn't matter what band or what mode you work them on, you only get credit 1 time. And then that adds up and you compete. So basically it's like starting your DXCC over every year. So it's fun to do. And I've been doing this for a number of years, and I got my one friend started doing it with me also. So we became sort of obsessed this last year. This is the scoring sheet. So since the beginning of the year, since the beginning of 2023, I've now worked 160. There's actually one error. I've actually worked 161 entities in 38 of the zones. And Jim has done about the same thing.
Man, you must not have a life outside ham radio, huh?
Well, it's funny because once we get started in this, the fun thing is because you're doing this new each year, that means everyone is an exciting new DX entity to work. You know, normally, so the first DX station I worked in 2023 was a 9 Alpha. Then I worked a Charlie Echo. Then I worked a C. These are all stations I've worked many, many times. So you can see over time by the, let's see, I got my first 100 countries by the 21st of July. Of January. And right now I'm at 158 countries. Now I haven't updated this list. There's 4 new ones that I've gotten. And actually there's 5 new ones because I just got a new one this morning. So every day is an exciting journey to work new DX. So again, the presentation is
and you do all these on QRP?
Yes, tiny.cc DX Marathon. And when you compete in the marathon, you actually compete in one of 4 different groups. So you're only competing against people in your same power level or your same antenna. They have 3 groups called Formula, and in Formula I have a choice of either 5 watts maximum with any antennas or 100 watts with simple no gain antennas such as verticals or dipoles. The limit is 100 watts with most antennas under 4 elements. Unlimited is any power level, any antennas that your license allow. So I operate under the maximum of 5 watts. So that's available, and you can find this presentation on my list, or you can just.
So what do you use? A long wire or off center
Well, I'm working 5 watts, so I do have a beam. I have a 3-element
Oh,
Yagi.
okay.
I have then for 80 and 160, I use a sloper, a double leg sloper that comes off my tower. Unfortunately, the one leg fell onto the ground
That's
on
what I
Monday.
heard this morning. You said, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not able to work 160 very well, and I found out that I was getting some intermittent sounds on 80, and what it is, I think there's a bad connection up there. It was cutting out, so I got to get the tower worked on this spring and put up a sloper. If it would have just stayed up for another weekend, so I could have worked a 160 contest, I would have been happy.
But you
Then I
don't
also have a
climb the tower
43-foot
anymore,
vertical.
do you?
I'm sorry.
I say you don't climb the tower anymore.
Well, no, it's a Lumen tower that can't be climbed. It has a hazer unit that goes up and down, but a tree grew up over the last couple of years, and I got to get that trimmed before I can get the tower down. So it's a long process, but
Oh, shoot.
so other questions? I'd be happy to answer anything. Doesn't have to be my topic I talked about.
Monopolize the conversation here.
No, that's fine. That just gives people more incentive to ask other questions. So we have Ollie and Ollie the iPad both here. Dennis, KC3, PFJ, where are you at? See if he unmutes and responds. And Ken, W1KMH. They must be shy.
Or maybe not watching their screen or something.
They went out to find something better.
Well, you know,
or get a cup of coffee.
Read your note or something like that. So.
This is Ollie the iPad.
Hi, Ollie.
My call is K1UIO. I have a question.
Yes.
Do you have a pointer to your Excel spreadsheet that shows where all of your stuff is?
Yeah, you
I
can
missed that if you did.
You can go to K8ZT.com, my website. Let me show that real quick.
Okay.
He's got so much stuff on his website, you get lost.
That's the easiest way to point you there. Let me show you what this looks like. So K8ZT.com, and then there's a big green button here that says list of presentations. You can also go to that list directly by typing in tiny.cc/K8ZT-P, and that'll take you to the list. But if you go to the website, you can also get access to other things like up at the top under operating, I have tips for new hams, maps and charts, contesting. So like some of these just have a few links on them. Here's the maps and charts, for example. Contesting has a few more, maybe just a few more, but so I tend to have lots of links on my website. And then there's DX News and other things, operating information. I also have a section on different types of radios. There's a page for each of the major radio manufacturers. I'm a big Ten-Tech person too, so I have a presentation called Odyssey of the Argonauts that talks about the power mites and the Ten-Tech Argonauts. I also have a whole section on youth. I'm the youth coordinator for Ohio. If you work with youth, I have a whole page that has resources. And if you want a handout to use when you're doing public presentations, this is designed as a tabloid 11 by 17. You can print it out, laminate it. It has two sides, or make 2 copies of it. And then the nice thing is you can give all these handouts out by just letting them scan the QR code. So you only have to have 1 piece of paper on your table, have it laminated, maybe 2 pieces of paper so that there's no waiting. And they can shoot the QR code and get any of these resources.
That's a very cool idea.
Yeah, so that's available on my website under the youth section. Then it's this one right here where it says Ham Radio Youth Resource Handout, tiny.cc/HRY.
Well, I know how I'm going to spend my evening. I'm going to have to dive into all your links.
Well, that's very good. That's what I like for people to do.
Well, I think we are reaching the limit here. Are there any closing questions or closing comments that anyone has that they would like to share with Tony?
Well, I just want to remind everyone, if you would like a presentation for your local club just please contact me and I'd be happy to schedule something. I'm always scheduling. I have stuff scheduled all the way up through December of this year. So if I have a place to fit you in, I'd be happy to fit you in to an upcoming presentation via Zoom. And you can
All
pick the
right.
topic.
I know that we appreciate your time, and we thank you for joining us here in the balmy climes of Vermont. So thank you very much. And everyone else, we will be starting with the operate from anywhere remotely in just a few minutes if you want to stay tuned or if you want to tune out. Thank you, Anthony. Please stay
73.
warm.
I will. 73.
73.